He brought his son home in a coffin. But before he could say goodbye, a barefoot boy whispered, "He's still breathing." The death certificate had already been signed. His world had ended. But what if grief had made them blind to a miracle? And why did a homeless child see the truth that doctors couldn't? He thought he lost everything, until a stranger gave him a reason to hope again. Rain clung to the clouds like it too, was holding back tears. On the porch of a quiet southern house, a man knelt, back bent, soul broken, as thunder grumbled low in the distance. His shirt was still neatly pressed, shoes polished like he was headed to a board meeting. But there was no business left to attend to. Just a tiny wooden coffin resting before him. And the unbearable silence of what should have been a new beginning. This was Nathaniel Graves, once a real estate titan, 33, invincible. Until 3 days ago. He had watched his wife, Maya, disappear behind the swinging doors of a delivery room, whispering, "We'll meet him soon." Her hand had trembled in his. They had waited for this child through heartbreak, through loss, through 2 failed pregnancies, and the silent agony no one ever sees. And when that final scream echoed from the delivery room, Nathaniel had sprinted down the hallway, heart hammering. The doctor didn't need to speak. His face was a verdict. "I'm so sorry," he had said, voice barely above a whisper. "Your wife didn't make it. And the baby." A pause, a breath. "He was born, but only for a moment. We did everything we could." Nathaniel had collapsed to his knees, and for 3 days he hadn't truly stood back up. He brought his son home, not to a crib, but to a coffin, not to lullabies, but to the haunting creak of porch boards beneath his grief. He couldn't bury him in a cold funeral home. Not yet. Not before saying goodbye beneath the same roof they built with hope. He stared at the child now, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, lips parted slightly, chest unmoving. Nathaniel's fingers hovered over the edge of the tiny box, too afraid to touch, too afraid to admit what had been taken. But something stirred behind him, a whisper of bare feet on gravel. Nathaniel didn't turn. The weight of sorrow was too much, but a small voice pierced the silence. "Sir, your baby. He's not gone." The man blinked. His head didn't move, but his ears strained. Behind him stood a boy, no older than 8, thin as a shadow, his skin streaked with dust and cuts. A torn blue shirt hung off his shoulders. His name, his story, all of it invisible to the world, except this moment. Nathaniel slowly turned, as if waking from a nightmare. "What did you say?" "I saw him move," the boy said, pointing. "He's breathing. I swear that sentence didn't make sense. It couldn't. The death certificate had been signed. The doctors had confirmed it. But something in the boy's voice, that trembling urgency, that innocent certainty, made Nathaniel's stomach twist. He lunged toward the coffin. He stared. And then he saw it. A flutter, a breath, a rise and fall, so small it could have been imagined. But it wasn't. Nathaniel's hands shook violently as he reached in. The baby's cheek was warm. Not cold. Not lifeless. "Oh my God!" he gasped, stumbling backward. Panic flooded his veins. The world blurred. He turned to the boy. "Stay here," he choked out, pulling his phone from his pocket, his fingers barely working. He dialed. "My son is alive," he shouted into the phone. "Send an ambulance, now! He's alive!" The boy stood motionless. And as the sirens began to wail faintly in the distance, Nathaniel's knees buckled, but something inside him flickered. A flame. A second chance. Nathaniel's world turned into a blur of motion and heartbeat. He stood at the edge of the porch, breath ragged, phone still in hand, the words, "He's alive," echoing in his head like a drumbeat. Behind him, the small wooden box held more than grief now. It held the impossible. Blue lights flashed at the end of the street. Sirens grew louder, slicing through the stillness like a knife. The boy hadn't moved. He stood barefoot beside the steps, thin arms at his sides, eyes locked on Nathaniel with a kind of quiet, knowing that didn't belong on a child's face. The ambulance skidded to a stop. Doors flew open. 2 paramedics jumped out, rushing toward the porch with a stretcher and oxygen kit. Nathaniel stepped back, pointing with trembling fingers. "He's inside. He's alive. Please, help him." One of the medics bent low over the coffin, checking the baby's vitals. A faint pulse. Barely there. But there. "We've got something," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "Let's move." In a flurry of practiced hands, they lifted the infant, wrapped him tightly, and placed him in a temperature-controlled unit. Oxygen tubes connected, tiny chest rising and falling under the haze of a plastic dome. Nathaniel scrambled into the back of the ambulance, never letting go of his son's hand. His son, who had already been mourned, who had been touched by death and somehow returned. He didn't look back until the doors slammed shut. The boy, that nameless boy, was still standing on the porch, unmoving, a silhouette against the gray morning. As the ambulance screamed through city streets, Nathaniel whispered into the dome, "Please, please stay with me. Don't leave again." The hospital lights were bright, cold. A team of specialists was waiting at the ER entrance. Neonatologists, nurses, techs, all moving in tandem, like gears in a machine that couldn't afford to pause. His child was swept into a room of machines and urgency. Nathaniel was told to wait. But he couldn't sit. He couldn't breathe unless he was near. Time dissolved. Every second stretched like an hour. Every beat from behind those ER doors punched his chest like a threat. Finally, a doctor emerged. Middle-aged, calm, but exhausted. "Mr. Graves," he said gently. "Your son. He was dangerously close. But he's stable. Weak, but fighting." Nathaniel sank into the nearest chair. His chest caved in with the sob that escaped his mouth. He wasn't a man right now. He wasn't a millionaire or a founder or a CEO. He was just a father who had fallen into a nightmare and clawed his way out by the sound of a stranger's voice. A stranger. The boy. He shot to his feet. Nathaniel rushed back to his home, breath short, legs trembling. The sirens were gone. The medics were gone. But there he was. The boy, still sitting on the porch steps, knees pulled to his chest, watching the sunrise like it was any other day. Nathaniel knelt in front of him. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice raw. The boy blinked. "Micah." "How did you know?" Micah didn't hesitate. "I saw his chest move. I've seen babies before. I just knew he wasn't gone." There was no dramatics in his voice. No need to explain. Just the quiet truth. Nathaniel stared at him. This boy with dirt on his face, scrapes on his legs, shirt ripped at the seams. But eyes clear, voice steady, and presence like a lighthouse. His voice cracked. "Where's your family, Micah?" Micah looked down. "Don't have one. I sleep near the laundromat, sometimes the alley. Nobody really sees me." And in that moment, in that impossibly cruel, impossibly beautiful moment, Nathaniel realized something unbearable. This child, invisible to the world, had seen the one thing everyone else missed. "You saved him," Nathaniel whispered. "You saved my son." And in return, Nathaniel knew what had to come next. That night, the mansion didn't feel like a home. It felt like a memory. Too big, too silent, echoing with what once was. Nathaniel stood in the kitchen, watching as Micah devoured a bowl of pasta with both hands, like he hadn't eaten a warm meal in days. Because he hadn't. The boy's cheeks were sunken, his ribs faintly visible through the loose cotton of the shirt Nathaniel had given him. He was clean now, fresh from a long bath, wrapped in a towel earlier like a rescued animal. But the weight he carried in his eyes, that hadn't washed off. Nathaniel sat across the table, hands still trembling, not from shock anymore, but from the ache of what could have been lost, and what had just been found. Upstairs, in the nursery that had been frozen in time since Maya's death, Benjamin lay in a hospital-issued bassinet, hooked up to monitors and oxygen, recovering, alive, against all odds, against reason. "I don't get it," Nathaniel finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How did you see what no one else could?" Micah kept chewing, eyes on the table. "People don't really look at me," he said after a moment. so I got used to looking at them instead." Those words landed like a punch. Nathaniel stared at him. The boy didn't flinch. He just kept eating, quietly, methodically, as if he didn't even realize he'd said something that could shatter a grown man's heart. A silence passed between them, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed with something old, something raw. Nathaniel leaned back, overwhelmed. The house suddenly felt too full of ghosts. He saw Maya's smile in the hallway mirror, her laugh in the room across the foyer. He could almost hear her voice saying, "You're going to be such a good dad." He closed his eyes. "Micah," he said gently, "you shouldn't have to sleep on sidewalks, or beg to be seen." Micah shrugged. "It's just how it is." Nathaniel shook his head slowly. "Not anymore." He stood up, walked to the fridge, pulled out a small glass of juice, and placed it gently in front of the boy. "You matter, you hear me?" he said, kneeling down beside him. "You matter." Micah looked up at him, eyes flickering with something he didn't seem to understand. Not gratitude, not joy, just disbelief. The silence deepened. Then Nathaniel stood again, moved to the window, and stared out at the street, the same one Micah had wandered down, barefoot, unseen, unnoticed, and changed everything. He picked up his phone. "I need to speak with Child Services," he said into the receiver. "Yes, urgent. His name is Micah. No, I don't know his last name yet. But I want to help. I want to start the process. I want him to stay here." Micah had gone still. Are you trying to adopt me?" he asked quietly, like the word itself didn't belong in his mouth. Nathaniel turned, eyes full of something rawer than tears. "I'm trying to give you what you gave me." The boy's throat worked, but no words came. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Nathaniel crept into the nursery. He stood by his son's side, listening to the soft rhythmic beeps, the steady rise and fall of a fragile chest. The boy who wasn't supposed to be here. The boy who had fought to live. He gently touched Benjamin's hand, and then turned to the small mattress laid out near the window where Micah now slept, curled beneath a heavy quilt. Nathaniel stood between them, one hand on the bassinet, the other on the doorframe. 2 children, one born of him, one born for him. And in the silence, he whispered to the dark, "I'm not going to lose either of you." The next morning, the house breathed differently. For the first time in days, sunlight wasn't cruel. It streamed gently through the curtains, touching the walls like a blessing instead of a reminder. Nathaniel stood barefoot in the hallway, listening to the soft creaks of the floorboards as Micah padded toward the kitchen, following the smell of breakfast. Micah wore a fresh hoodie, 2 sizes too big, sleeves falling past his hands. But the way he held himself was different. Still quiet, still hesitant, but no longer invisible. Nathaniel had called in sick to every meeting. Let the board handle itself. Nothing mattered right now but this fragile thread of new life, and the boy who'd stitched it back together. Upstairs, Benjamin's heartbeat monitor beeped in rhythm with the ticking wall clock. Nurses from the hospital came and went, checking vitals, adjusting wires, whispering to each other in careful tones. Micah stared at them all with wide, unblinking eyes. "You can come closer," Nathaniel said softly, crouching beside him. "He's doing better today." Micah stepped forward slowly, peering over the bassinet. The baby's chest rose and fell, small fingers curled around nothing. "He doesn't even know how close it got," Micah whispered. Nathaniel nodded. "Neither do I." A pause. "Do you ever get scared?" Micah asked suddenly, eyes still fixed on the baby. Nathaniel looked at him. "Every second," he admitted. "Not of the world. Of losing what I've just begun to find." Micah's lip twitched. Not quite a smile. More like recognition. But the calm didn't last long. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. Sharp, official. Nathaniel opened it to find a woman from Child Protective Services, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp but not unkind. "I need to speak with you. About Micah." Micah froze near the staircase. Nathaniel motioned her in, heart pounding. "I'm requesting guardianship," he said firmly. I want to begin the adoption process. Her expression remained neutral. Mr. Graves, I appreciate your intent, but it's not that simple. The child has no documented history, no medical records, no last name. If he's been on the streets, we'll have to run a full investigation. He might be placed in a group shelter while we process. No. Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like glass. You're not taking him away. Not after what he's done. Micah shrank against the wall, arms wrapped tightly around himself. The woman hesitated. With all due respect, it's not about emotion. It's about protocol. Nathaniel stepped forward. Do your paperwork. File your reports. But if you put him in a system that already forgot him once, I'll make it a national case. This boy saved a life. 2 lives, actually. And if that doesn't earn him a home, I don't know what does. Micah blinked up at him, stunned. The woman's eyes softened slightly. She nodded, reluctantly. We'll see what we can do. But be prepared. It'll take time. I've got time, Nathaniel said. What I don't have is patience for injustice. When the door closed behind her, silence fell again. Nathaniel turned to Micah. You okay? The boy didn't answer. He just walked to the couch and sat down, knees pulled to his chest. I've seen places like that, he said after a long pause. The shelters. They're cold, not just the beds. The people. Nathaniel sat beside him. Well, this isn't a shelter, he said gently. And you're not a case file here. Micah glanced up. Nathaniel met his eyes. Your family. A long silence. Then, for the first time, Micah whispered, Okay. The storm finally came. Not outside, but within. It began with a phone call Nathaniel almost didn't answer. He was sitting beside Benjamin's crib, holding the baby's hand as his chest rose steadily beneath the oxygen dome. In the quiet, every beep felt like a lullaby. Micah sat curled in the corner, sketching something with a dull pencil on the back of an old envelope. Then the phone buzzed. Caller ID. Department of Child Welfare. He picked up, bracing. Mr. Graves, the voice on the other end said, We've completed our preliminary investigation. Nathaniel stood slowly, his chest tight. And? There was a pause. Paper shuffling. Micah's records don't exist. No birth certificate, no guardianship history, no school enrollment. Legally, he's a ghost. Nathaniel swallowed. So what does that mean? It means you're his only option, if you're still willing. The words didn't land with joy. They landed with weight. Because it meant Micah had truly belonged to no one. Nathaniel looked across the room. The boy wasn't listening. Or maybe he was pretending not to. The agent continued. There's a lot of red tape. You'll have to go through home studies, psychological evaluations, background checks. We'll need proof of schooling arrangements, medical support. Done, Nathaniel said instantly. All of it. Just tell me where to sign. Micah looked up at that. Later that night, Nathaniel sat beside him on the porch swing, the same place he'd once wept over a coffin. Now, the sky above was bruised with stars, and Micah stared into the dark like it was hiding something he didn't want to name. Why are you doing this? Micah finally asked. You don't even know me. Nathaniel turned toward him. I know what it's like to feel like the world moved on without you. Micah didn't speak. I know what it's like to scream inside and have no one hear you. Still, silence. I know what it's like to lose everything, and find something better in the ashes. Micah's fingers curled into the blanket wrapped around his shoulders. I used to wish someone would choose me, he said finally. Not out of pity, just because they wanted to. Nathaniel didn't blink. Then let me be the one. Micah looked at him, eyes glassy. Even if I mess up? Especially then. The boy's face broke, just slightly. Like a crack in a wall that had never been touched before. But just as the silence turned warm, a sound pierced it. Benjamin's cry from upstairs. They both stood. Nathaniel rushed in, with Micah on his heels. The baby squirmed in the crib, face scrunched, tiny fists flailing. His body stronger now, louder, alive. Nathaniel scooped him into his arms, holding him close, rocking gently. Micah stood beside them, watching. "Want to try?" Nathaniel asked. Micah froze. "What?" "Holding him." The boy hesitated, then nodded slowly. Nathaniel guided the baby into his arms. Micah's hands were small and unsure, but steady. The baby blinked up at him, hiccuped, then settled. "He's warm," Micah whispered. Nathaniel smiled. "So are you." They stood in the middle of the nursery. A boy who had nothing, holding a boy who almost didn't survive, watched over by a man who had lost everything and was slowly remembering how to live. In that moment, no one said a word. But something sacred passed between them, and for the first time in a long time, the house felt like a home. Weeks passed like pages turning in a book you never expected to love again. The house that once echoed with grief now pulsed with quiet laughter, new footsteps, and the soft, cooing voice of a baby who had been to the edge and clawed his way back. The nursery walls were no longer haunted. They were alive, painted pale green, scattered with stars, and filled with the steady rhythm of a heart monitor slowly becoming unnecessary. Benjamin, the boy who was once declared gone, now gripped his father's finger with impossible strength. And Micah, the ghost child, had become something real. Nathaniel stood before a judge, papers in hand, suit pressed, but hands trembling. Micah sat beside him in a clean shirt and khaki pants, fidgeting, biting his lip, eyes darting toward the doorway like he still half expected someone to yank him away. But the courtroom was still. "Mr. Graves," the judge said, looking over the file, "you are aware this adoption makes you fully responsible for this child?" "I am," Nathaniel said firmly. "Do you understand the emotional, financial, and legal obligations?" "I do." "And you're choosing this without hesitation?" Nathaniel didn't blink. "I'm not just choosing it, Your Honor. I'm honored by it." The judge looked at Micah. "And you, young man, do you wish to be adopted by Mr. Graves?" Micah's voice caught in his throat, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." The gavel came down with a soft thud. "Then by the power vested in this court, I hereby declare the adoption finalized. Micah Graves, welcome home." For a moment, Micah didn't move. And then, almost shyly, he reached across and grabbed Nathaniel's hand. No words, just a grip that said everything. Later that evening, the three of them sat in the backyard beneath a golden sunset. Nathaniel in a chair with Benjamin on his chest, and Micah on the grass, drawing again, sketching a house with 3 stick figures beneath a sky full of stars. "I made us," he said, holding it up. Nathaniel smiled. "You got my hair all wrong." Micah grinned for the first time without holding back. "You don't have hair." Nathaniel laughed, and it echoed off the fence like a song that had been waiting years to be sung. Then Micah turned serious. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think my real parents would have wanted me?" Nathaniel looked at him, deeply, painfully. "I don't know what they wanted, Micah, but I know what I want. I want you, every version of you. The angry one, the scared one, the brave one who saved my son, and the quiet one who still doesn't believe he deserves to be loved." Micah blinked hard, but said nothing. Nathaniel continued. "You didn't just save Benjamin's life. You saved mine, too. And that means, no matter what came before, this is where your story begins. Right here, with us." Micah swallowed, then leaned against his chair, his head brushing Nathaniel's arm. They sat like that until the stars appeared one by one, blinking slowly into existence. Inside, Benjamin stirred, whimpered, then calmed as if, even in sleep, he knew he was no longer alone. And in the weeks that followed, Nathaniel didn't just become a father. He became something deeper. A man who learned that grief is not the end, but the beginning of another kind of love. One born not from blood, but from choice. From the day a boy no one saw what no one else could. And whenever people asked what happened, what changed him, what brought him back from the edge, Nathaniel would simply smile and say, "It was a homeless boy who gave me back everything I thought I lost."